Good morning, and welcome to another episode of A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm B.C. Cloutier, Chairman of the Board of Action for Life, and this is Father Michael Orsi. How are you, Father?
Oh, I am marvelous.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah, it's a new year, and we have all kinds of these great ideas, New Year resolutions, how it's going to be a good year, and how we're going to be better people this year than we were last year. So, folks, I hope you're sticking to your resolutions and that you're improving yourself. Just get better with age.
I find that by mid-January, I finally stopped writing last year on checks.
Yeah.
And that's always exciting.
Right. Oh, yeah. I said, oh, my gosh, it's 2025. Holy cow.
That is amazing, isn't it? It's just, anyway, we won't go there. Where we are going to go today is the state of education in America. And I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about. Let me start with Pew Research did a study just this past November. And 51% of the people say education is going in the wrong direction. 16% say it's going in the right direction. And 32% are not certain. That's a really high number of uncertainty.
Right.
But that aside, if you break it down by political leaning, 65% of the right and 40% of the left say that education is going in the wrong direction. And of both of those political persuasions, they say the public education system is say that the public education system is going in the wrong direction. The major reasons there are three of them. Schools are not spending enough time on core academic subjects. Reading, math, science, social studies.
Yep.
70% of the people said that. Teachers bringing their personal, political, and social views into the classroom.
I can agree with that.
And the third one is, and this one I find curious, the third one is schools not having the funding and resources they need.
Well, that I can't agree with.
I don't either, because we keep throwing money at the schools and we get nothing in return.
Yep. Yeah. All right, let's talk about it. I am disappointed in the state of education in our country. There is nothing more important than to educate good citizens for the future of our country. The children are the future of our country. They have to be educated. Now, basic education is extremely important. A lot of people don't get a basic education. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, and civics. Civics means that you know how your government works. You know the history of your country. You know the values, the ideals of what America, if you're American, what America is all about. I think a lot of our young people are no longer reading, and reading is extremely important. I had a friend of mine, he taught with me in law school, and he told me that his son got into Princeton. And I said, what high school did he go to? He says, he didn't go to high school. And I said, where did he go? He says, we homeschooled him. All right. I like homeschool. It's not for everybody, but it's a wonderful thing. So I said, what course program did you use for homeschooling? He said, we didn't have a course or a program for homeschooling. I said, what did you do? He said, we just threw old books all around the house on all different topics, and we put instruments around the house too, and he could do whatever he wanted. I don't know. And, my father did that. When my mother and father did that to me, I'd be in jail. I mean, whatever I wanted. But the kid was a reader. That's a reader. You get educated just by reading alone.
You know what, Father? You hit on something that if you can read, you can educate yourself about anything. Yeah. And I'm living proof of that. But my mother instilled a love of reading in me early on, and that continues to this day. But we see the same thing again and again in education. One of the things that rings true with me is we're not teaching students how to think. We're teaching them what to think.
Right.
That's a problem.
Right.
When you don't have critical thinking skills, you are behind the curve.
That's right. Critical thinking skill means you can figure things out. Personal things you can figure out, family things you can figure out, government things, job-related.
Candidates you can figure out.
Right,
Who's
exactly.
being honest and who isn't.
Right. And so if you do not read and you do not develop those critical skills, and you have to have something solid behind those skills that help you to develop, a sound opinion on issues, how to act responsibly, how to see reality for what it is and not just what somebody tells you it should be. That's a problem today. So you can go to some classrooms if they're doing critical race theory. Just that was a big thing, for a while. Critical race theory, and this is what you ought to believe, and this is the truth, and this is the truth, and you just take it from what one prejudiced person, one person who themselves are indoctrinated. That's what the communists do. They indoctrinate. They tell you what to believe. Well, you're going to fall into that, and you're going to end up the same way, and society is not going to benefit. You're not going to benefit. When you read, and I'm saying, read different kinds of literature, read history, read scripture, read novels, read the newspaper.
Well, and I think, Father, read a broad spectrum.
Yeah.
So don't, if you're, pardon me, conservative the way we are, don't just read what's on Fox News. See what's going on the other side.
Right.
Because, it's, dare I say, the New York Times
We're not supposed to say that.
is certainly slanted left,
Yeah.
but it's worth reading to see the way they're thinking.
It is. Every day I read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And somebody said to me, "Why do you read the New York Times?" And I said, "You got to know what the enemy's thinking."
That's true.
Yeah.
How are they thinking? You can, I think, look at what's being said and say, on occasion, that's interesting.
Yeah. And, sometimes the writers are good writers. I mean, they're often slanted to the left, but they're good at their craft.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you a story. We're talking about, reading, how important it is. And we talk about reading and writing and arithmetic, okay? I was awful in math, just awful. And my father was so good, even had me a tutor in math. That didn't do me any good either. So I spent many a summer in summer school trying. And when I went to summer school, they just passed me just for showing up. That's the only way I passed, all right? And I'll tell you a story. I then became the vice principal of a high school, and I had to go and do observations of other teachers teaching. So I get sent to the class, I think it was geometry, one of those, and I was filling out the form. Teacher seems to know his subject. Students seem to be interested. Classroom is decorated beautifully. I'm saying, what the heck is this? There's a book that came out. It was called In Numeracy, by a guy named Paulus. Not Linus of Peanuts, but Dr. Paulus from Temple University. And I'm reading this book because I like to read. I just didn't like to be bothered with X's and Y's and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, a window was open to me. I began to see all that stuff that I never cared about before, to see it in a different way. And you know what did it? There was a chapter in the book, and he was talking about, I forget what it was, how to come up with certain numbers, trying to figure out how many people could fit in a certain area and all that. The stuff that you do when we have parties. It's like that stuff. He talked about, because he was from Philly, Temple's in Philly, and he talked about the number of people that could fit in Connie Mack Stadium.
Uh-huh.
And he gave, we have, this wide of an area, and we have this is the size of the size of the seats, and all of a sudden, wow, it began to make sense to me. And so, then the next time I went to observe the math class, I said, "Oh, the teacher is unfamiliar with the trigonometric theory of Aristotle and his Summa Theologica." I'm making it up.
There are a lot of issues with education, and after the break, we can talk about what's happening here in Florida with micro schools and some of those things. But one of the basic issues with education today, in my opinion, Father, is teaching used to be a vocation.
Vocation, sure.
Now it's a union job.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a lot of difference because teachers weren't worried about working 30 or 40 hours a week. They worked as many hours as they had to educate their kids.
Yes.
And for the most part, that's gone by the wayside, unfortunately.
Teaching was considered to be a high calling, and the person who taught had to be of high moral character. We could talk about that in a few moments.
We will do just that. We'll be back right after this. But for the moment, I'd like to talk to you about the expense of airing this program. Many people don't realize how expensive it is to produce this program and to get it on the air. Would you care to guess? It's about $3,000 per week. We think that's a reasonable expenditure, but obviously it's an expensive one. So we need to ask for your help. If you'll go to actionforlife.org and click on the donate button, it would be greatly appreciated. Now, you can donate once or you can donate each month, and we certainly have viewers who do both. We appreciate that. Please take time now to visit actionforlife.org and click on the donate button. Thank you so much for your support, and may God bless you always.
Hi folks, over the weeks you have become more and more familiar with our program, Conversations with Father Orsi. I know that you are enjoying the programs because you tell me that you do. I want you to be sure that you should never worry about missing an episode because you can go to actionforlife.org and catch all of the episodes that we have produced over the last year. Now, also, extra added bonus, you can watch my homilies, my weekly homilies about the Sunday readings. That's also on actionforlife.org. Lastly, both of these adventures, conversations and the homilies, they cost money. And I'm going to have to ask you if you can help us out because so many of you tell me how much you enjoy the program. Some people tell me our Sunday wouldn't be the same. We record the program, we watch them during the week. This is an expensive enterprise, and we think it's an important way to get out the gospel message and to talk about those issues of the day that are important to us as Christians. So please go to your website, actionforlife.org. There is a button you can click for donations, and please be generous to us to keep this show on the air. Your Sundays will not be the same without it.
Welcome back to a conversation with Father Orsi. I'm B.C. Cloutier. We were talking about teaching being a high vocation versus a union job. And I'm sure you have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, you will remember, I'm sure a lot of you folks remember, some of the old movies. And in those days, they had what they called a school marm. Remember the old school marm? And a lot of those people, they were single people.
Yeah.
And it was like a vocation, and what the presumably was that they had to have high moral character, and they were going to remain celibate as long as they stayed in the classroom. That was, the presumption. So you might see some of the old movies and some of the old television shows where there was a school mom. You remember, Little Rascals? Remember Miss Crabtree?
I don't remember. Miss Gibb.
Oh, she was great, Miss Crabtree. Pretty girl. And Chubby had a big crush on Miss Crabtree. That's a little something on the aside. Anyway, yeah, it was a vocation. You had to have high moral character because you were passing on virtue, not just knowledge, but teaching students how to be virtuous citizens, how to be good people, and teachers became role models for the community. So not only good in your subject area, but also a good life that you could pass on, communicate to your students. It's important, certainly is important, that teachers know their subject matter. And we're talking about subject matter. We talked about, the basics. Teachers are not in school to indoctrinate students into the latest sociological theory or the latest theory that is going to fundamentally change America. Gabish? Yeah. Okay. What you are there for is to help people to think, to help students to think, so that you might present both sides of an argument, and you might have, even if you are in upper grade, let's debate this issue. For instance, let's debate immigration in our country. And you'd have students say, well, this is the history of immigration. This is the problem now. This is when we had quotas. This is when we have, family reunification. This is why a country might have a border. And you could discuss, are these good things or are these bad things? And you could even bring, children who are coming from different ethnic backgrounds where they could talk about their own family's history of emigrating to this country. And that's a good education. And give books. Let the students read books about, the history of people coming to this country, the different cultures, what they brought to this country, and not just try to make everything like a battle between different sides. These people are good, these people were bad. Do you understand what I mean? We've tried to make everything like so black and white, and it's not black and white. And it's not just somebody saying, well, this is because of racism and this is because of sexism. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there that, hey, wait a minute. There's no just easy solution to some of these problems. Could it be racism? Sure it could be. Could it be sexism? Sure it could be. But what else is there? How do we debate these things? If I just keep calling everybody a racist who I disagree with, we're not going to have a united country.
That's right. Well,
or a decent human being.
And I think that mistakes are made in life. Mistakes are made by governments.
Right.
It's important that kids talk about those things.
Yes.
Slavery was a huge mistake. I think very few people would disagree with that statement. Japanese internment in World War II, a huge mistake.
I mean, disgusting.
Those historical occurrences should be discussed and debated.
Right.
So that, first of all, there's knowledge in history, and also so they don't occur again.
Right.
And, it's kind of interesting to me that a 24-year-old, now 25-year-old, actually, we're in a new year, doesn't remember the 90s. They weren't on the earth.
That's right.
And so they have no other than third or secondhand knowledge. Right? They don't know what we know.
Yeah. One time when I was vice principal of a high school, that meant I was in charge of all the vice. One of the teachers came in to me, a nice young fella. Well, maybe he wasn't a young fella. Maybe he was in his 40s, and relatively speaking, that's young. But anyway, he was all upset because his students had no sense of right and wrong. They had no sense of their responsibility to society. And he said, I said, well, what do you mean? And he says to me, they don't give a darn, he said another word, folks, about Vietnam. Now, Vietnam ended when? 1972.
Yeah.
All right? A lot of these kids weren't even born.
Right.
And they had no clue. They had no moral outrage about Vietnam. They even had no idea about all those poor soldiers and sailors and Marines and Air Force, they came back all messed up from Vietnam. They weren't there. They weren't there, and it wasn't part of their memory. But, we have to educate people into that. This is what happened in Vietnam. And like I say, Vietnam was a mistake. It was a mistake.
Oh, absolutely.
All right? But, we have to talk about the mistake. And I think sometimes, we have these, when we had the field trips, I don't know if they still do this anymore.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you'd go to Washington, take your class to Washington for a field trip. Go to the Vietnam Wall, tell the story. I mean, that'll give you a sense of, how serious and how bad that war was. It was like a bad, why did it happen? Why did it happen? If you learn, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it.
Yep.
And that's what it says. Santayana said that.
And it's true. And I think that there are all of those. We've set examples from now till the end of the show. Let's move on a little bit here.
Okay.
In the state of Florida, we give parents a certain amount of money
Right.
per student so that they can be either homeschooled in a micro school or in a private school, religious or secular. That seems to be working really well.
It's fantastic. I think it's $8,700 a year.
I think that's the number, yeah.
And that's fantastic. I mean, you can choose how you want to educate your child, and parents are the first teachers of their children. They're responsible for that child's education. And I don't think there's any other state that's that generous helping you to educate your child the way you think your child should be educated. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of it, because that way you have control over what your child is learning. Not just learning insofar as the numbers, but what your child is learning insofar as the way the world is and what America is supposed to be for our citizens and for the rest of the world.
Now, a lot of people don't know what micro schools are. Micro schools are, I guess, in simple terms,
Little schools.
8 or 10 families
Yeah.
get together and say, we're going to school our children as a group, and we're going to run the school. It's all a do-it-yourself project.
Right.
They have proven to be extraordinarily effective.
Right.
The kids that come out of these micro schools, many of them are brilliant. And that's another opportunity that the state of Florida and some other states, although it was interesting in the last election, 3 states voted down school choice. I don't remember which 3.
Well, that's where you have very strong teachers' unions that put a lot of money into making sure that they are the only show in town. And that way they protect the jobs of those people that are in their union. And once you have a teachers' union that becomes so powerful, it's very hard to change education. As a matter of fact, you go to a place like New York City, and even if a teacher, is removed from the classroom because of some infraction, they can't fire them.
Right, they continue to get paid.
Yeah, and they put them in what they call the rubber room. They report to work every day, and they go sit in the room.
Yeah, it's the teachers union throws so much money at politicians
Yeah, yeah.
that using the term bought and paid for may not be appropriate, but in the case of the teachers unions, I think it is appropriate.
I believe so. Plus you have teachers unions that are promoting certain ideology like transgenderism, LGBTQism. I mean, this is what's going to be fed to your teachers in some of the public school systems.
And that's a reason to keep your kids out of the public schools, sadly, that even if they're getting a good education in terms of reading, writing, arithmetic, they're in many instances being indoctrinated
Right.
in alternative lifestyles, etc. And, kids are not capable of making those decisions,
they're not.
particularly when they will affect them for the rest of their lives.
Right. And, you were talking earlier about our education system is lacking in many ways. I think one of the big things is that so much money is not being spent on the kids. It's going to administration and various levels of administration. And therefore, by the time it gets to the kids, there's very little left.
It's if you go to virtually any school system, you go on the website, And for those that publish this, you drill down. So you have a superintendent, fine, and then you have, various other people. These are all administrative people who never interact with students. Each one of them has an assistant. I mean, it's like the Full Employment Act.
Right.
And all of that money is not going toward it's going toward, administration, and even that is of questionable value. Yet it's happening all over the country. And I think the states that are enlightened, like Florida, and say, hey, you want a teachers union, that's fine. But if our citizens choose to enroll their kids in alternative schools,
Yes.
that is their right. And at some point in time, the public schools have to improve or disappear.
Well, I think that they should disappear. I think that they should disappear because we seem to have lost control of them. And a lot of times school boards, they're supposed to be guiding the superintendent and the principals, they have become just as political as the people that they're supposed to be governing.
Well, I'm eager to see if our incoming president is going to eliminate the Department of Education. I think it's a great idea.
Oh, yeah.
I realize there are some functions that will have to be reassigned to other government agencies, but education is a state's issue.
And it's a state's issue. It belongs with the states. Why should the feds have their nose in the federal government? I'll tell you what happens. It's big bucks and, federal money, and the states, especially get those blue states. I mean, they're going to promote a very liberal agenda. Maybe getting rid of the Department of Education gets us away from that mindset, that very progressive mindset. Okay.
Final thoughts. We've got about 60 seconds.
Folks, one of the most important things in the whole world, if you have children, make sure that you know what they are learning. If you have the capacity, send them to a private school, one that you pick, Catholic school, Christian school, yeshiva, whatever the case may be. Homeschool if you can. I think homeschooling is fantastic. Microschooling. Be sure that you are doing the job that God gave you to do. And that job is what? It's to take care of, to educate, to guide your children, to make them physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, and not to corrupt their souls at a young age. Help them to get to heaven. That's our purpose. God made me to know Him, to love Him, to serve Him in this world so that I could be happy with Him in the next. Basic stuff.
Thank you, Father.
Yeah.
And thank you for watching. We hope you'll be with us again next week, same time, same place, for another episode of A Conversation with Father Orsi. Until then, I'm B.C. Cloutier. Have a great week, and God bless.